Oh, do I have a story for you tonight, Ben Stein?
I want to find out what happened in Syria.
We did an airstrike, right,
I
Ben
know, but
Boychuk?
on who? On who?
On
Yeah.
Syrian rebel,
Different
on
if we did it on
Iran,
the UJA than if we did it on some terrorist group.
on Hey Rock Breath, on Iraq,
Oh, can we turn it
on
up? Can we
Iran,
turn up the sound?
Iran funded soldiers and rebels.
Sir, can we turn up the volume, please?
You mean your volume you can't hear?
I'm
I
actually
can't hear
having a
very
little
well.
trouble hearing too. I'm not sure what's going on. I think his volume's a little low, Judah. Maybe his mic. I'm not sure. Are you able to hear me okay, Ben Stein?
Yeah, but not great.
It's
Okay,
I'll
but
tell you why in a second.
Okay.
Ben Boychuk, keep talking.
Okay.
Ben
Ben Boychuk.
Boychuk. Well, wait a minute. Wait, I'm still confused. Is someone going to explain what happened in Syria?
Yes,
I'm-
but we will do it when the show starts.
Yeah.
You said it just started.
Well,
Well, not we're live on YouTube. Hello, YouTube.
Hello, YouTube.
Yes, hello everybody on YouTube. And I've learned that I have to say hello to everybody. That way the chat is able to start.
Oh, can't
Hey.
hear you, Ken.
Oh.
You're muted.
Can you hear me? I was just
Yes.
breathing.
I hear Ken.
Good
I
morning,
hear Ken.
gentlemen.
I hear Ken.
Good evening.
Good morning.
I
That's
hear
very
you. I
funny.
hear you. I hear you.
Okay,
I hear you. I hear
let's
you.
let's start this off correctly. Ken,
I
you
hear
look
you.
beautiful. Ben, you look divine. Ben Stein, everybody, you just all look perfect. I want to welcome everybody to the world according to America's humble servant, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. Welcome everybody in our YouTube chat. Welcome everybody that's commenting. And we are honored with all the downloads we've been getting on iTunes. Please don't forget to tell your friends, tell your enemies, steal their phones, like it, give great reviews. It's amazingly appreciated. We're humbled by all the outpouring of.
You're humble.
Very humbled by the outpouring of downloads. We're joined tonight by a couple of our regular contributors at this point, obviously. But first man up is head of the Media Action Network, former Fox big wig, a man I have great respect for. But Ken, why don't you tell people quickly what Media Action Network is, because it's so important.
You know, we basically are creating a right-wing alternative to Media Matters. We are a place where people can do more than just bitch about the left-wing media, but actually can do something about it. So every day we send out a newsletter to our about 100,000 allies around the country to give them a way to kind of fight back. And whether that's standing in line and complaining at Bed Bath and Beyond for zapping out the My Pillows because the CEO had the temerity to back Donald Trump, or whether that's going head to head with somebody at CNN, or whether it's trying to build up the right ecosphere and the conservative media on the right. We're a place we can fight back.
You sum it up perfectly well. And like I said to you, your mission statement is quite simple and you can understand it. And I always say, if you can't understand the person's mission statement or a person's, a company's mission statement, stay away. And on that note, also with us tonight, we have managing editor of American Greatness, Ben Boychuk. Welcome back as always, Mr. Boychuk.
Many thanks for having me.
You actually have the most Jewish last name of all of us on the show, but
I don't know about that.
I don't know. It's a Ben because it's so Yiddish. Ben Stein. It's very Yiddish. Boychuk. He's a good Boychuk.
Stein is still pretty
good. Okay.
Friedman's also very on that note, but of course the show wouldn't be complete without writer, economist, lawyer, husband, father, former shoe salesman, former Federal Trade Commission
for 6 days, but I did love it.
That shows commitment to selling shoes. Of course, we are joined tonight by America's humble servant, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. Thank you, sir. And right off the bat, I want to get into something that Ben has been writing about for 40 years. And I mean, Ben, you literally predicted the future. I want to throw this out at you, then at everybody, but there's two things one book that people keep bringing up. It's 1984. People constantly are forgetting about Lord of the Flies. but we'll get in that in a few. But Ben, you have continually spoken about this being us becoming a racialist nation, nation. And it's I mean, your prophecies have been coming true.
Yes, well, I notice that. Well, let me back up a little bit. When I was a little boy, I wrote a paper. It seems to be in 8th grade about what was then called the Union of South Africa, and about the apartheid policies, and about how the country was divided up into whites, people of Indian descent, and people of African, Black, what was then called Negro. Of course, we would never ever say that now, descent. And the top jobs went to the whites, even though there were very few of them. Then a large number of jobs went to people of East Indian heritage, very few of them. And then the most miserable jobs went to the what we would have then horribly and sickeningly called Negroes, Black Africans. And so that was all blown away by the abolition of apartheid. Now we have apartheid in America, where the top jobs and the big jobs in both government and in private sector are being awarded on the basis of race, in which we have a roughly 13.5 to 14% in this country African American, and they, although of course 99% of them have never been to Africa, and the other, and they get all the plum jobs without having to have many other credentials besides being African American. Then the whites get whatever's left over. I don't know how many people there are of East Indian heritage, Chinese, Asian, so forth. They don't, I don't know what they get, but they get to be rich and be surgeons and so forth. But the plum jobs are given to African Americans for the very simple reason that they are the bedrock of the Democrat Party. And so that is called racialism. It's not racism. I would call it racism, but it's more proper name, I think, originated for South Africa is racialism.
So I have a question.
Here.
Why is it horrific to use? Why is the term Negro horrific?
I don't know. I don't know at all. I don't know. I know when I was a child, which was a long time ago, I'm old. When I was a child, most people in my school, which was a segregated school, called Black people by what is now called the N-word. I was very much opposed to that. And I used to say to these kids and to some of the teachers, how would you like it if they went around calling us wiggers? We wouldn't like it. So let's not use that phrase. And I got punched in the nose many times for saying that. But anyway, I still don't like that word. And and somehow I think the word Negro, which is the word that Martin Luther King Jr. used, and he is certainly the greatest Black person in the history of America, was, at least I think he was, he used the term Negro. Now that has become a verboten word. And if it's verboten, I don't want to use it.
But Ken brings up a great point, because when I hear that word, I have in my mind, I think of Satchel Paige. I think of, I have this romantic term for that term with the Negro Leagues. And, but again,
well, I still am getting mail for solicitations, charitable solicitations for a group that is a fundraiser for what they call Negro Colleges. And I don't know, that might have stopped in the last couple of months, but obviously that if that word has been banned, the ban is extremely recent.
We also had the United Negro College Fund ads, right?
That's what I mean. Yeah,
a mind is
I've been contributing to them since before any.
Which it said a mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Well, what we saw is a group of people.
That's why they shouldn't be Democrats. But anyway, anyway, you're not allowed to use that term. But there are so many things you're not allowed to do now. The list just goes on and on and on and on. The Wall Street Journal had an incredibly powerful piece mocking something being done by the Coca-Cola company. And bear in mind, I am the world's champion lover of Diet Coke. But they had a piece about how the powers that be at Coca-Cola have circulated a memo telling people to be less white, because white is somehow associated with dominance and condescension and racism.
Yeah, they're calling it Woca-Cola now. Ken and then Ben Boychuk.
Go ahead, Ken.
No, I just found it interesting. Look, what we now call blacks have kind of renamed themselves every 30 years in America. I'll never forget being in college, let's say early 80s, and I saw what back then we called a film strip of Bill Cosby pounding into kids. He was very strident for his race when he was younger, had the big afro, and he was telling this kid, if they don't call you a Negro, you don't turn around.
Oh, that's very good. That's very good.
And it was kind of interesting. You know, it went from whatever to colored to Negro to African American to black, and it kind of shifted around. And I wasn't ever 100% sure why that was happening. I mean, but it was always like every 10 years, it's like you need to call this one group of people something different that they've now changed, changed the marketing on.
Yeah, it changed very strictly. I used to be a very, very frequent commentator, very, very frequent at CNBC, and very frequent talking about the stock market. And somebody planted a bug in my makeup room, and I was just referring to, as a matter of fact, the United Negro College Fund, and someone heard that, and I was fired from MSNBC forever for using that because I'd been solicited by them. It was incredible, but it happened.
Good. They don't deserve you.
Let's go to the guy next with the shaved head to talk about race. Ben,
it's a little scraggly right now. I think the terminology has evolved over time as politics on race has evolved over time. And you skipped one, Ken, Afro-American briefly.
I forgot that.
In the early 70s, I think, early to mid 70s. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's an odd thing, particularly for someone who's a Generation Xer like me, who I came of age in the 1980s at a time when Martin Luther King Jr. was getting a national holiday. And for those of us who grew up at that time, particularly, it may be particular to Southern California, I'm not sure, that we believed the language and the rhetoric of Martin Luther King Jr. From 1964, the I Have a Dream speech. We didn't learn so much about what King was saying in 1968, which was much more radical. But the language much more radical. But in that speech of 1964 and
it was actually I'm pretty sure it's 63
or 63. You're right. Yes. Before my.
I'm sorry for distracting you. I beg your
pardon.
Before
my time.
Comparing the speech of 63 to his language in 68. I beg
right. And so so we were taught that, and we believed it, and maybe naively, because I think in a lot of ways, Martin Luther King Jr. has kind of been sanitized for Americans.
And that's actually a great point, Ben Stein.
Can I respectfully point out, I spent a lot of time listening to compact discs. I'm probably the last person in America who doesn't download anything. Everything I get, I buy on compact disc, and my whole house is just absolutely overwhelmed with piles of compact discs. And many of them are speeches of Martin Luther King Jr. And I have listened to the speech he gave the night before he was murdered, and it is a very, very mild, loving speech. This was a man who, although definitely in the end of his life was turning towards Marxism, but he walked in the footsteps of the Lord Jesus Christ. There is no doubt about that. And I will say over and over again, the man who walks in forgiveness is walking in the footsteps of God. And I think Martin Luther King was doing that up until the night he got killed, and the night before he got killed. And it's the loss to the nation of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Wouldn't it be fair to say, Ben Stein, wouldn't it be fair to say that Americans would do well to just understand better the complicated legacy of Martin Luther King Jr.?
I would say it would be yes. There's nothing more valuable than listening to the great words of Martin Luther King Jr. But I have the terrible feeling that today's young African American Black people don't know those words. I don't think they know those words, and that's a real problem. And I'm quite sure that the heads of the Ivy League colleges and the prestige colleges and universities of America have no idea what Martin Luther King Jr. was saying. And I might add, just on an extremely parochial note, Martin Luther King Jr. was a huge fan of Eretz Israel, that is to say, of Israel, and spoke for it all the time. Whereas today's African American freedom fighter Black leadership are very anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian, and somehow that's very different from what Dr. King wanted.
Right.
You actually just brought up a great point, and I want to get into the next segment. If you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. I want to thank everybody that's on the YouTube chat tonight. Remember to sign up for our newsletter, benstein.substack.com. Did I get it correctly, Ben Boychuk? Thank you. Yes, I did. And of course, download our podcast wherever you are in the world. We have people listening in Romania, people listening in Switzerland.
Wait a minute. I want to ask a question. May I ask a question to you, Ken LaCourt, who are smiling so broadly? Why was Romania, and don't you answer it, Ben Boychuk, because I know you know the answer. Why was Romania of incredible, fantastic significance in World War II? Don't answer, Ben Boychuk. I know you know the answer.
It was the Romanian Empire, and now you stumped me. Yeah, of course.
Because Romania has the only significant amount of oil in Western Europe or Central Europe, and the Axis, namely the Führer, depended on Romania for the great bulk of his oil. And that is why it was of great significance. And when Romania dropped out of the war and switched over to the Allied side, it was a catastrophe for the Nazis, thank God.
The more you know with Ben Stein. Ken, I'm just glad he didn't ask me that question. I think Ben Boychuk might be glad too. But getting back to it, welcome back to The World According to Ben Stein. Ben, you brought up a great point prior to this, and I want to get to everybody on this one. You brought up about there's a lot of revisionist history, obviously, and there's a lot being there's a lot being taught incorrectly. But there's a lot of being taught incorrectly to the Black community, and I wonder if they've been taught about Jesse Owens. And
that's a very good question. That's a very good question. Very good question. I wonder if they have been taught how this great country freed the slaves. It was not a servile insurrection. It was not by a group of Black people rising up and fighting. It was by white people going off in droves to free the Black man. Very large numbers of white people died to free the Black man. That is never brought up when we discuss the racist history of the United States, and it is a racist history. But as my very smart friend, Glenn Miller, who is also a minister, said, when the Lord Jesus Christ was being crucified, he said, the debt has been paid in Greek. And that by which he meant the debt that is owed to the Lord God for the sins of mankind has been paid by his crucifixion. And I think in large part, not entirely, by no means entirely, the debt of the incredible mistreatment of the Black man in slavery was paid by the blood of the hundreds of thousands of white men who died and were maimed in the war between the states.
So Ken, that's a great point, Ben.
He's been preaching it. Ben, I've heard more Christian preaching out of you in the last half hour than I've heard anywhere in the last 2 days.
It's the hour.
It's the hour and I can preach it flat.
It's the hour.
I think somebody converted you.
Yeah.
Hour of decision. I used to listen to that show from Billy Graham, and I have in my room where I'm speaking to you. Hey, wake up. Go get that picture over there of my father with Billy Graham.
But I want to ask you guys both a question, both Ken and Ben Boychuk, Ken and Ben. Ken, you have a 28-year-old son. Mm-hmm. Do you think he knows who Jesse Owens is? Do you think he knows the Black Power symbol from the from the Mexico City games, I believe, where it was, where
I think it was 60. It was 68,
Jesse
right?
Owens, my dear friend,
That was.
No, I'm talking about two separate events. No,
Yes,
no.
you are.
I'm asking if they.
Here is a picture. This incredibly handsome dude is my father, Herbert Stein, with his friend Billy Graham and the recently departed George Schultz.
So the people listening on the podcast, Ben put up a picture and showed a picture of his father with Billy Graham. And yes, I know they're two separate events, but they're two seminal events in Black history, I think, in the Mexico games and Jesse Owens. Do you think either of your kids was taught that?
I don't know.
I don't think, I think my son might know about it. He knows a lot about sports.
What about you, Ben Boychuk?
Not a chance.
Well, I don't know. I will ask my son. I'll call him after the show.
I mean, more likely Jesse Owens, because that was a seminal event in world history. Less so the fists up in Mexico City.
And so, but getting back to this gender thing, getting back to hiring on all this stuff. This has actually been going on all this week, you know, Ben, where gender it's what Ken was referring to the other night on the show with this intersectionality. You know, we're literally, you know, hiring people not on merit anymore. I mean, you know, we're hiring on race, we're hiring on gender, we're hiring. I mean, it's Ken LaCourte. I mean, when you were working at Fox,
I think that I'm the Goyim representative here.
Oh, wait a minute.
No.
There's no Jew.
Wait, Boychuk, I don't know. I heard it was the most Jewish name I'd ever heard.
Yeah, and yet I'm the guy. Remember, we were talking last week. I was the guy who was contemplating going into the monastery.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
We're still waiting to see the neck tattoos on you, though.
Never.
But getting back to it, I mean, it's almost like if you woke up in these times, if you just woke up out of a coma and you saw what was going on, what they're fighting over in Congress these days, over the guy that's going to be in charge of Health of Human Services, pro partial birth abortion, them talking about genital mutilation on the House in the House.
How it's okay. He's talking about okay. And he's from our beloved California. What a stone asshole he is.
No, I mean, but in anybody's here's wildest dreams. I mean, how the hell did we get here? Did we lose the university systems this greatly that this isn't?
They're gone. Goodbye.
No, that I know, but like, if you're like at home and you're like 30 years old, I mean, or whatever age, Ken LaCourte, I mean, how do you not look at this stuff and go, what the hell is going on here?
Well, my fear is that
what the hell is going on?
My fear is that the 30-year-olds feel like it's normal. I mean, that's the scary thing.
Very scary. You're right.
At least our age, we get to see that this is very screwed up on a number of levels. Look, I've seen it kind of from my point of view. I saw it work its way, the censorship thing, work its way through the school system. At the high school, it was the anti-bullying movement turned into the best person in the world is a victim movement. It turned into the anti-free speech movement at college, and they've aged now into .coms and all of that world. But it's a troublesome thing, certainly.
It's the end of freedom of speech, for God's sake. Thomas Jefferson, that racist pig, said, if we are to choose between a society with no government and newspapers, or a society with newspapers and no government, I will take the newspapers and no government. Now we have the newspapers, which are a pawn of the media billionaires, and the newspapers, which are, and all of it is a pawn of the left-wing media, and all of it is pawns of the so-called left-wing intelligentsia, as if Stalin himself, Zastalina, was sending people who were disagreeing off to the labor camps in Kolyma.
You know, what's kind of fun, though, is we got to be counterculture in the last part of our lives. Who would have thought that?
Well,
it's fun. But it isn't that great, because when I was young and being in the counterculture, you got to have sex and drugs. Frankly, we don't
with
get
the girls at the
now I could promise you, being part of the counterculture doesn't get you sex.
Yeah. We got to talk, Judah.
But Ben Boychuk, I want to go to you because I don't have children, and Ben's got the youngest children on the panel of the three of the rest of you guys. And in the old days, I mean, the most awkward conversation a father probably could have with their child was about the birds and the bees, Ben Boychuk. Now the conversations, I can't even imagine what you might be saying to your daughter about trans stuff. I mean, it's got to be awkward conversations.
It is akin to King Canute trying to command the tides. If
Oh, that's very good. That's very good. Very good. Very good. Very good.
Which, of course, my children wouldn't know that reference, sadly. I mean, I took my daughter out to coffee this very afternoon, and we were talking about, of all things, the environment. And I pointed out to her, I'm not quite sure how we got on the topic, but I pointed out to her, I said, you have never in your lifetime experienced, and for people outside of Southern California listening to this, you have never in your lifetime experienced a first stage smog alert.
Oh.
She said, what's smog?
Oh my God.
And I said, exactly.
Congratulations on that.
Right. Wow. And I had to explain to her what that was and how when I was a kid, and, you know, I remember going to pool parties in the, you know, as a youngster in the late 70s, early 80s, and my chest would hurt. And I said, you have never, I said, look out the window. And I said, you see all that gray? I said, you see those mountains past that gray? I said, you would not have seen those mountains 40 years ago.
Absolutely right. Brilliantly put, Ben. Brilliantly.
Yeah, and so,
can I say that was also a nod to the leftist environmentalist movement of the 70s?
Yeah, but you know something?
They did a lot of good. There's no
doubt. I don't miss my,
not leftist. Liberal.
I don't miss my chest hurting that much, Ken. I mean, you know, they did some things right.
It was
absolutely.
What I have a problem with is two things. One is that we have a generation coming of age, or that has come of age, believing that the planet is about to end. But the other thing that I have a problem with in terms of contemporary environmental policy, I used to get into arguments all the time with a former liberal colleague of mine when I was an editorial writer down in Riverside. You know, we are now arguing over such minute particle pollution, you know, where it's like 10,000 particles. I mean, it's so small. Whereas before we were talking about, you know, kids whose chest hurt. I mean, people who were getting asthma from, I mean, we're really dealing with such a small slice of certain problems.
And yet, and interestingly enough, Ben Boychuk, the leading polluter in the world, the People's Republic of China, is still polluting at a fantastic rate.
That's right.
They're still building fast coal-fired power plants. And we don't do a thing about it. We just kiss their ass every time.
Right. And so the point I tried to make to my daughter, who will be 13 in May, is that you have been taught a lot about, you know, problems in the environment and things that we need to do. But I can assure you that it was much, 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 much worse 40 years ago. And they don't know that at all. And the same is true with all of the crazy sort of identity politics that we have now. The idea that this nation is more racist. I mean, Ben Stein, for God's sake, you and I both know, and you lived through more than you lived through a lot of it when I was but a glint in my papa's eye. The idea that this country is more racist than it was even 50 years ago,
or even 10 years
patent
ago.
absurdity.
I think it's more racist than look. I think it's more racist than it was 4 years ago, though.
I can vividly remember, and I am not that old. I guess I am old, but I can vividly remember a president of the United States referring to black people as niggers, vividly, and that was Lyndon Johnson.
Right.
That was on a good day.
And he was probably the most effective at getting the left-wing agenda for the welfare state through that there's ever been. And by far the most effective in getting civil rights for African-American freedom fighters. And yet he called black people by that awful name, and that's how it was. That's just how it was. It's a whole different world. Even when I was in elementary school, and there was already color TV. I used to have a teacher
You say
who would
colored
routinely call
TV.
black people coons. A teacher in a public school. Can you imagine that?
I think I think we're sliding back a little bit though.
I agree with you 100%. I think
Both
we've
in
become more
blacks
racist.
and look, I'll be interested. I'll be honest. I'm a little bit more racist. I mean, I used to be like, it's like, oh, the only blacks I really saw were on TV, and they were all doctors and things, and everything was fine. I've never thought of myself more as a white person than I have in the past 3 years. I mean,
3 weeks, in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, but I mean, to actually, it's like I never kind of entered into the concept of, oh, I'm a white guy until white man became an insult in the lexicon of the left. I mean, when people start bashing on you, when you start seeing, when you start seeing that it's kind of open season and literally white male is a pejorative among a big part of society, it kind of makes you feel a little bit more like, wow, I guess I am one of these guys, and I guess I have to look out for my own.
Pick up the gun.
I never thought about until I was 48.
No, Ben Boy. I mean, you guys all brought up great points. It's like we're the old counterculture. It's surreal. It's like whoever thought the older, past 45, you become punk. But that's
we're not punk. We're not punk. We're Nazis, and that just by being white. And I'm Jewish, for Christ's sake. How can I be a Nazi? And yet we are Nazis by virtue of being white. Although I guess there are plenty of people. David Duke, I'm sure, doesn't consider me white. There are plenty of people, but many people consider me white just by being white, and that makes me a racist just by being white. Look, what I want to say to people like Mr. Biden and Mrs. Harris, who's not black, by the way, that is the biggest lie in America, is I was beaten with a police baton in my home state, Maryland, on I believe it was on Highway 50 in Cambridge, while I was in college, when I was down there for a demonstration for black people to have equal accommodations. I didn't see Mrs. Harris around there. I didn't see Senator Biden there. Senator Biden was a senator for the neighboring state of Delaware. Believe me, I didn't see him there. He's the same age as I am. I didn't see him there. But somehow I have become a racist merely by the fact that I am still alive.
And Ben, he's actually older than you. If you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. But the story of the day, one of my favorite stories of the day, is that Mr. Potato Head is no longer Mr. It is now Potato Head. The company has decided to drop the Mr. from the Potato Head. And I don't know where more of a cliff you could jump off than that. But if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. I didn't expect you to believe that story, Ben. Of all the stories I've told, that's the one you decided to.
I believe that there's no amount of ass kissing to the political police that I don't believe possible now.
But I want to thank everybody that's participating in the chat. It's greatly appreciated. Remind everybody to go to the podcast. We're getting big in Romania and big in the Netherlands. And we appreciate all the listenership all across the world.
Wait a minute.
Ask this to Ben Boychuk, not me.
It's all around the world hitting something in the Lolos, girl.
Okay, on that note, welcome everybody back to The World According to Ben Stein. I have no idea, Ken LaCourte.
That's from, gee whiz, that's from Dr. Dre. Have you no shame, you racist pig?
That's cultural appropriation.
That kind of music.
Ken LaCourte runs LaCourte News, and you brought up a great story. One of my favorite stories that you brought up yesterday was what they're trying. Ben Boychuk has also brought this up, but they're trying to get rid of the networks, right? They're trying to cancel Fox. They're trying to cancel One American News. They're trying to cancel Newsmax, and they're trying to get the cable companies to literally cut the cords.
Let's be clear, Judah. Let's be clear. Who precisely is they? in
Yeah, who
this
is they, Judah?
Democrats. Ken,
Congress.
Congress. Yes, Congress is trying to pass
The
bills.
way you guys said, "Who is they?" I'm like, God, it's got to be the Jews.
Terribly
But it
funny,
wasn't.
isn't
Look,
It's terribly funny, isn't it? Let me ask you this question, if I may. Do we not have a First Amendment of the Constitution which would forbid that?
look. This is. God, every week I find myself thinking that the guy last week was a naive ass, because the concept that we have elected officials who are now sending letters. And so here's what happened. We had two members of Congress, both Democratic members of Congress in California, who need to go, send letters off to the majority of large cable operators, basically doing the wink and noddy. It's like, how could you keep Fox News and these hate mongering companies on your cable channel? I mean, it was a bunch of questions, but look, these are people with political power who have the reins of federal power in their hand, and they're part of the majority now, that are basically, without too many winks and nods, threatening cable companies if they don't get rid of the three conservative networks on cable: Fox, the huge one, and two lesser ones. The Overton window has changed enough in America where that's a reasonable concept, and something that they actually had a discussion with, without somebody saying, "Are you people all freaking retarded? This is so much against the First
Wait a
Amendment."
minute, you're not allowed to say retarded.
Well, Remso last week said I could.
You're not allowed. You're not
So
allowed.
I mean, these it is as bad as it gets. 20 years ago we were like, well, the First Amendment really protects hardcore pornography, and the guy in the gold wheelchair, we got to take care of him. And now, it's a reasonable discussion to say, can mainstream news outlets be squashed and turned off? I mean, look, I know a lot of conservatives are mad at Fox these days because they called something too early and because they did this and that. Imagine America without Fox News.
I know, it's a terrifying thought.
We'd be
It's a terrifying thought.
So these people need to be, and I won't even say figuratively, they need to literally be driven out of town at the point of a pitchfork with people with tar and feathers after them.
Absolutely right. These people must be so viciously stupid. It's incredible, and it just frightens me that we have such stupid people in Congress. Although I will say again, as I've said it many times, Mr. Nixon, the smartest guy there ever was in politics, said as to his Republican colleagues, like the great majority of Republican congressmen, in those days they were men, are not fit to be dog catchers. So I think as to the Democrats, he would have said are not fit to be something even worse.
So Ken LaCourte, Ben Boychik, Ben Stein, you all have sites. Ben, you contribute obviously a lot for American Spectator. And Ken, you're constantly talking about action. What is the next step? We could go to Washington and literally drive these people out of town, but there's a lot of barbed wire across Washington right now, and they were all scared to death.
I have a home in Washington, and they cannot get to it.
And they were all scared to death. But what do we do about this? How the hell do we? I mean, because what we're talking about, again, if you just woke up and you said Congress is trying to get rid of television networks, people would be like when I read a story and Ben doesn't believe it's the truth and makes me come out of the room and show him the truth, people would say you're lying. There's not.
Wait, just one second. That was one story on Tuesday. It's Thursday, in which you made the incredibly racist and obviously false allegation that an African-American freedom fighter, member of the Columbia faculty, said and boasted that he was using heroin. So that was so obviously not true that it was comical.
Ken LaCourte, how do we fight back?
Look, I think we fight them on a number of factions. One is we look at our resources and what do we have. One of the look, we're not going to get as conservatives anything passed through the Congress and federal station for the next 4 years. That said, let's now go to California has been a great example of what one state can do to change national law. California, for instance, has our own EPA guidelines that are more stringent than the federals, and we forced car manufacturers to make cars that are acceptable into California. I think states like Florida and Montana and Idaho and the places where normal people are running it need to start passing some laws.
Don't go to Idaho. Do not go to Idaho.
Yes, especially not Sandpoint, especially where yes.
No.
I think we need to start writing on the state legislation to say, okay, we're pass laws there that will affect just like California did with some of our privacy laws that then affected the national. They need to start bringing in some things like that. Look, I would personally be a believer. I'm not a big believer in Title VII and the whole concept of protected classes, but I also believe that is part of our part of our.
Are you sure you don't mean Title VIII?
I think I mean.
Is this about women in sports in schools?
No, this is about
Title IX, Ben.
Various protected classes that you can't discriminate. Sex, gender, whatever, religion.
Oh, handicap,
right. And I think it's time for some states and let's go ahead and let's throw in if I can't fire you because you're of a certain religion, which I can't and I shouldn't, and I'm fine with that. Maybe we shouldn't be able to fire you because you're a liberal or because you're a conservative. And the concept of bringing in political beliefs as a protected class, okay, I'd be willing to think about that. So that's some legal stuff. The other part is we as conservatives, and look, we got some rich guys on our side. We need to build up the stack of technology on the internet and on cable. Rush did it on AM radio. Fox News did it on cable television, and we need some billionaires who are willing to say, okay, if everything's going to be you're a liberal restaurant, you're a conservative restaurant, let's build up the methods of communication on the right and for conservatives. And that means everything from server farms to DNS registers to electronic to providers of email. All of Silicon Valley needs to now have, because they've weaponized every single part of that technical stack. What conservatives need to build up a conservative stack of technology on the right to allow you to communicate.
Ben Stein wants to know what DNS is or DSM.
I want to know what a server farm is. That
well, so like
racist.
All of this stuff is on computers somewhere, and it's streaming from that. These things all live somewhere. So that's the basic level of where do you save your website? Well, you think, that's not a big deal until you saw that Parler was shut down because Amazon was their web server, and a very complicated and convoluted one at that, and gave them 24 hours to change their business model or get zapped. They need other people like that. The concept of we're on Zoom, which I don't know, it's owned by the Chinese or somebody at this point. I forget which commie owns Zoom these days.
China, somebody in China.
Yeah. But all of the methods of communication are now being weaponized by the people who own that, because it's a bunch of little Silicon Valley kids who are making $300,000 a year because they took computer ed in class, and we need to fight that back. But it's street by street, it's restaurant by restaurant, it's literally server by server. So all of that needs to be rebuilt. I know it's a little wonky, but that's
no, that's why
I would like to make a suggestion.
Yeah.
Let's all take our clothes off right now.
Ben, have you ever been to Burning Man?
No.
We should talk.
Ben Boychuk, I saw you raising your hand.
All right, I want to make. I'll make two quick points, if I may, because I know the second one is going to raise Ben Stein's hackles. But the first point is a point that I've made many, many times on this show before, but I need to make it again, and I'm going to make it again and again until it sinks into your heads, which is this: if we have any hope, and it's going to take time. If we have any hope at all of retaking this country, it's going to require people, good people, decent, ordinary folk, to get into politics. And by that, I mean, you're going to have to not just go to your local school board meeting or your local water board meeting or your local city council meeting, you're going to have to run for those offices, because those offices, particularly in places like California, that is how the Democratic Party forms a bench. And it is from those, what you believe to be insignificant bodies, that they get candidates for state legislature and who go on to, become city mayors, and who go on to, in the case of Gavin Newsom, become governor of California. And so,
okay, what's the point that's going to make me upset?
The other point I think we need to do, and I think this.
I hope you're not going to propose ending pornography.
No, but I am going to propose beating the shit out of people with antitrust laws. Amazon.
Antitrust laws.
Yeah, and Amazon right now controls 83% of the retail book market. That's a fact.
That's amazing.
And so the other day, over the weekend, Amazon removed a book by my friend Ryan Anderson called When Harry Becomes Sally, which was published by.
Funny. That's a very funny title.
Well, it's
a great title.
It's about the trans phenomenon, and it was published in 2018 by Encounter Books, which is run by my friend and contributor to American Greatness, Roger Kimball.
That's a well-known thing.
And for reasons that have not been explained, that book has been delisted from Amazon.
Look, and it was not a fire burning.
No,
people suck. It was an honest
look
at things. It was done with respect towards all humans. I mean,
Ryan Anderson is the furthest thing from a fire breathing polemicist.
I think you mean
that book,
farthest, but anyways.
For God's sake. Yes, thank you. And so that book is gone. You cannot get that from Amazon. You can get it from Encounter, but you can't get it on Amazon anymore. And what all Amazon has said is, we've upgraded our terms of service to say that we're not going to allow people who've published hate speech to sell their books on our platform.
So why do you think that was going to rankle Ben Stein? I'm just curious.
What do you have? I mean, antitrust, man. I mean, Amazon should be kneecapped and broken up.
I'm very much in favor of antitrust.
All right, well, good. I wasn't sure about that, because I know in the past I've said we need to swing the hammer against big tech.
Absolutely in favor of antitrust.
I've said in the past, Ben, that we need to swing the hammer on big tech, and you're like, well, I'm not so sure about that.
I'm very much in favor of strict enforcement of the Sherman and other acts.
Well,
let me read to you a quote from Amazon. This quote is in 2010, when they were under fire for having a book called The Pedophile's Guide to Love and Pleasure, a Child Lover's Code of Conduct.
Wait, how does it go again? I'm kidding.
So they said Amazon believes it is censorship not to sell certain books simply because we or others believe their message is objectionable. Amazon does not support or promote hatred or criminal acts. However, we do support the right of every individual to make their own purchasing decisions.
Yeah.
That was in defense of a book that was like different than what you're describing, and we've come that far.
I think you mean different from what we're describing. But let me just say,
welcome to my world, everybody.
Let me just say, if I may, if you want to try to catch liberals in contradictions and embarrassments, it's a full-time job
and an easy one.
It's
never ending.
You see, here's the thing. You got Ben Stein. You just brought up a great point. It's never ending, but because the obviousness of what they do is it blows your mind. This and the reason I brought up 1984 is them watching themselves eat themselves, because they're the ones that are getting canceled. They're the ones that are getting, you look at what's going on with Cuomo. But you brought up a great point. It's like the other night, NBC, right, had a show where I don't want to mention the name, where they had an anti-Semitic trope on it. Obvious anti-Semitic trope. So kind NBC, what?
It was kind of funny, but go ahead.
Did you see the show?
Yeah, so.
They said Israel announced that they've vaccinated half of their people. I'm guessing that it was the Jewish half.
No, I wasn't
That was
referring to
kinda funny.
SNL. I wasn't referring to SNL.
Fairly funny,
Okay. There were
isn't it?
2 out last week.
Yeah, I was referring to one called Nurses, where they portrayed a Hasidic family or Orthodox family that wouldn't take a bone graft, as they said on the show, from a guy, from a non-Jew.
Right.
And everybody that knows Jewish law knows that's not the case, knows when you're sick, whatever it is. And NBC finally decided to pull an episode, not the show, but an episode. And so, when we see these things, these are the things we've said for so long, like it baffles your mind, like, because we know if it was us, if we know, I was just waiting for my turn. We know it baffles your mind, or boggles, great game, that if any of us were to do it, we'd be canceled in a heartbeat.
Before we answer that, what was the name of the book again? Just kidding.
When Harry became Sally.
No, the one from
the
Amazon
I
book.
respectfully say we're not going to have a hard time finding inconsistencies and untruths and outright fraud by anyone, anywhere. That's just the way human beings are. And the fact that Amazon is a very large company is not going to stop them from doing bad things. And we need a government that will enforce antitrust. That's absolutely true. And there is no free speech and freedom of market without enforcement of antitrust. It is extremely important, and it's really, really important.
It's an odd thing. I find myself, I'm mere months away from my 50th birthday, and I find
happy birthday.
Well, another July. You can tell me again then.
Oh,
But it's weird. For one thing, I find myself more of an ACLU liberal than ever before.
Ooh.
In the sense that, much more of an absolutist, more so than even ACLU attorneys, apparently, because there's one particular attorney who is is practically Robespierre when it comes to transgender rights and suppressing speech that is offensive in that respect. But I also find myself thinking back 30 years or so to some of my Marxist professors in college who would write these long tracts and books about the corporate control of media and what a damaging thing that could be, and thinking to myself, those Marxist bastards were right. The concentration of all of these companies in very, very few hands, and you can see it, and you come to realize, and I've known this for a long time, and I think a lot of people listening to this have known this for quite some time, which is the problem with whether it's big government, big tech, big business, big anything, isn't so much the noun as the adjective. It's the bigness of it. And the bigness of it is something that at least America's founders sort of understood, that something that was so big, so massive, so unaccountable was a danger. And I am hopeful, but I'm not certain, but I'm hopeful that as our politics continues to realign, that people who haven't thought so much or cared so much about the greatness of the largeness, the bigness of private sector institutions may begin to come to understand that those great big institutions also need to be somehow accountable, and that we just can't simply concede the idea that just because it's not the government doesn't mean that it's good.
Tell me the book. So
By the way, he's referring to the NAMBLA book, not
kidding about
not
that.
the one. Yeah, of course you're kidding.
Child Life or
Harry
something.
Became Sally. What may I respectfully say, just as an economist, I would say free market societies do not function anywhere near as well as they could if there are monopolies, and we
Sure.
have a lot of monopolies now, and we would be much better off if we did not have so many monopolies, especially in the field of communications, where intersectionality tells us that monopolies in commerce are also leading to monopolies in speech, and that's really bad.
That was a good line.
That is a great line. And by the way, I just wanted to bring up something quickly that you posted today because we're running out of time. And I'm curious in the chat if anybody else has noticed this, the inflation that's going on with product.
Yes.
You know,
We
a lot of
thought
people.
we had the laws of economics said forever that if you are producing a great deal of money in a society, if you're printing money, you're going to get inflation. And we were not getting inflation. Something seemed to be wrong with the laws of economics. Now we're starting to get significant inflation. And apparently it is not only going up, but the trend is accelerating, so that it's going up at an accelerating rate. And this is a very scary thing, because if we're going to have serious inflation, along with serious unemployment because of COVID, there's going to be a fair amount of suffering and a really bad nightmare if prices are going to go up, interest rates are going to go up, and we're going to have a much higher interest rate burden on the national debt. And that's going to be a lot of burden for this country to be carrying, considering how much the national debt has gone up in the last recent years.
Another story, but that nobody seems to be talking about. I would imagine news reporters go to, Kroger's or Ralph's or Pavilions or whatever. But, I'm a diet ginger ale man myself, and it's gone up $2 a case. I mean, $2 a case of soda.
It's amazing. If it hits the way it's likely to hit, it's going to require very substantial pain and dislocation within the society. And it's funny because it was so readily predictable. I would say
Yeah, but it's been readily predictable for 10 years, hasn't it?
Right.
More than that.
Right. You're exactly right, Ken.
So what is it going up to? And how much are the numbers really jumping?
They're not jumping that much yet, but the trend line is up. That's where they were going up very, very slowly. Now they're going up a little more rapidly, and very recently considerably more rapidly, especially in terms of food and commodities.
Okay, because I recently looked at the
energy commodities.
I really recently looked at the San Bernardino County, don't ask, 12-month CPI increase was 1.8%.
Yeah, but it's going up much faster than that now. That's a very low rate. I'm under the impression that the rate is approaching between 3 and 4%. That is a very large difference. It doesn't seem like much, but it's an enormous difference.
Yeah.
I mean, Ken, you're a wine connoisseur. You have a drinker.
Dude, this came out of a box. I'm a drinker, not a.
Have you noticed any? You haven't noticed any increase in what you've been buying, or Ben Boychuk? Like coffee's gone up by $3 a bag.
How dare you impute to me that I'm...
Sir, we have data. We don't base our conversation on anecdote. We have data, and the data is telling us that inflation is increasing. Inflation is increasing, and as I say, if in fact it turns out not to be increasing, great, but it would be unheard of. What's happened so far is unheard of. That to have this level of monetary creation with no effect on inflation is unheard of. It's just
Ben Stein, I think that we should all just embrace modern monetary theory and pretend none of this is happening.
Well, but modern monetary theory says that nothing happens. Monetary theory is essentially nihilism. It says that nothing matters for anything. Just do anything you effing feel like.
Why can't we just put our hands over our ears and say nah, 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 and just pretend that none of this is happening at all? I mean, it seems to me that's a viable solution, don't you think?
That's sort of what we've been doing.
Well, maybe we should keep doing that.
I mean, historically, if we play games with basic economic principles, we have bad results.
Could you remind our Lithuanian audience what your father famously said?
If a thing cannot go on forever, it will stop. And I think is that what you're referring to?
Exactly.
Yeah, the Stein law. This idea of extraordinary monetary creation with no effect on prices, if that cannot go on forever, it will stop. And there's never been a time when there's been extraordinary monetary creation when there wasn't serious inflation, except during World War II, when there were very strict price controls. And then when the price controls were lifted, we had an explosion of prices after 1945. So it's going to be, we'll see.
When's the last time we've had inflation
see.
above 6% in America?
I'm sorry?
When is the last time that we've had inflation above 6%?
I don't know, but we had in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
It was in the teens. It was in the teens.
And then Reagan came in, and then all the politicians realized that you can never get reelected if there's high inflation.
Well, then they put the screws on monetary creation, and we had a very serious, painful adjustment in terms of recession and unemployment. We had what was called the misery index, which is a combination of the unemployment rate plus the inflation rate, and it was a very, very high index number. We haven't seen anything like that since the early and mid 80s. If we have that kind of number again, I think Mr. Biden is going to have to disappear, and the replacement hologram is going to come up.
Ben, we're running out of time.
It's going to be an Indian chick.
There's one really important thing I want you to tell people tonight, because a lot of at the end of every episode, I decided I want you to, because a lot of people don't know about certain things. Ben, you know a lot, and
very kind.
you know, there's one fact that I find very interesting that I was just thinking about as we were having this conversation, is that most people don't realize that the airline seats used to be fixed pricing.
Oh yeah, very fixed pricing, and it was great because for those.
If you could just explain what happened, what that means,
they were deregulated, and the prices went way down. But the airlines got very crowded, and instead of being a spacious, pleasant way to travel, it became a crowded zoo.
But it used to be
Greyhound in the sky, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, but Ben, it used to be that seats were priced, right? They were priced that the company could make money.
Right. They were priced so that the company could make money, even if the flight was barely full at all. And I must say, as a person who in those days could afford to fly no matter what the price was, it was great.
And on that note, that's I think that's a very interesting factoid. The more you know, we've learned a lot of the more you knows tonight. We learned about Ben Boychuk. Say the name of your friend's book and where they could find it, because I think it's important.
It's called When Harry Became Sally. It was published in 2018 by Encounter Books. And if you want to buy it, if you don't have it already, you're going to have to go to encounterbooks.com, and please do.
I want to thank Ken LaCourte from Media Action Network and LaCourte News. Tell people where they can find you, Ken, because you're back.
We actually promoted that book this week, as well as some. You can't get it online at Barnes and Nobles, but some Barnes and Nobles have it still in their store. So if you put in your thing, but that's what we do. Go to MediaActionNetwork.com. And every day we got some way for you to kick back at those sons of bitches.
And of course, you can find Ben Boychuk at AM Greatness and BB Oychik 3 on Parler. Welcome back, everybody, to Parler and from Parler. Ben, you're not on it, right? You're not using it, but of course,
I've had a hell of a time getting on there, so they've still got some glitches to work out.
Yeah, let's go, and we'll ride the glitches out. And of course, this show wouldn't be possible with @Ben Stein on Parler. You can find him at American Spectator, spectator.org. He's America's humble servant, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. You wanted to take us out with a song tonight, so you remember the song? You wanted me to.
Oh yes, I'm the great pretender, pretending that I'm doing well. My need is such, I pretend too much. I'm lonely, but no one can tell. Pretending that I'm doing well. Good night, everybody, and have fun.
Good night, everybody. Have a great
Cheers.
night. We will see you all Saturday night.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.